Shalom, how's everyone doing? Today's day 45 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. We're going to be learning Siman Seif Tesvav. Let's begin. Asur ledaber divrei Torah kedusha neged erva. One is not allowed to speak in divrei Torah or dvarim shebekdusha when he's facing nakedness. Bein shalo, bein shalacher, whether it's his own nakedness or others' nakedness. Va'afilu mekaton uktani, even from a small child. Rak letzorach mitzvahs mila, murta levarich neged erva satinok. Except if you're giving kid a mila, then you could say a bracha by a kid's erva. Va'afilu im otzem einav shalo liroses erva lo mahani. Right? Even if you close your eyes so you can't see the nakedness, that doesn't help. Kevan shi negdo, since you're facing him. Ela yata panav v'gufo mikonegdo. Rather, you have to turn your face and your body so you're not facing it anymore. Okay. So until now, we've been discussing the dinim of tzoah. That one is not allowed to say dvarim shebekdusha in the presence of tzoah or meriglaim. But if you look in that parsha that deals with the Indian of not saying Devarim Shebekdusha by Tzoah, it says something else. It says Lo Yerav V'Chayer V'Stavar. There's also another halacha that you can't say Devarim Shebekdusha in the presence of nakedness. And obviously, so just like we say it's a deoraisa idea to not say Devarim Shebekdusha by Tzoah, the same thing. It's also the pasuk, the deoraisa idea that you can't say Devarim Shebekdusha by nakedness. So obviously we'll have to define what does nakedness mean, right? What does that mean? What does it ever mean? What does nakedness mean? But if you look in the Aruch Shulchan puts it clearly, and everyone agrees with this, that at least when it comes specifically to a man only has one erva. A man has one nakedness, and that's obviously his private area, his aver. That's going to be the nakedness specifically of a man. When it comes to a woman, we're a little bit more machmir, but at least when it comes to a man, that is the only nakedness that the Torah says that you can't say Devarim Shebekdusha by. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two is something that Kitzur starts off with, and he says Asur ledaber. He says it's forbidden to speak words of Torah and kedusha by nakedness. But this is different than tzoah. By tzoah, we have halacha that one can not only not say Devarim Shebekdusha by tzoah, but he's also not allowed to think Devarim Shebekdusha. That's what we learn by tzoah. But the Gemara is very clear in Masechtas Shabbos Daf Kuf Nun that when it comes to erva, there's a leniency that there's just an issur to speak Devarim Shebekdusha if you're next to something naked, but you could think in learning. You could think Devarim Shebekdusha. And the Gemara makes a drasha, right? The pasuk says Lo Yerav V'Chayer V'Stavar, right? You shouldn't see a matter of nakedness. So the Gemara makes a drasha. Don't learn the word davar, which means matter. Rather, it says dibur, that you shouldn't speak matters of nakedness. That's what the Gemara drashens, that you're only not allowed to speak Devarim Shebekdusha by an erva. Okay. Next, we'll discuss the next point that Kitzur talks about, and he talks about the nakedness of a baby. Does that have a din of nakedness? So, this is the Kitzur said that it does. We'll see what the Rishonim said. If you look, the Rabbeinu Yonah talks about this, and he quotes a minhag. He says there are those that people have a minhag that when they're giving a bris milah to their kid, obviously when it comes to the bris milah, the erva is exposed. That's going to be exposed. That's what we do the milah on. So some people, they have a minhag to cover when they do a milah because they're going to say a bracha before they give a kid a milah, and obviously you can't say a bracha, you can't say Devarim Shebekdusha in front of an erva. Okay. However, some people say you don't have to do that. And Rabbeinu Yonah says, you know why they say that you don't have to do that? Because when the Torah says that you can't say Devarim Shebekdusha by nakedness, they mean a person's nakedness. They don't mean nakedness of a baby. A baby's nakedness is not considered an erva. So, okay, those are the two opinions he quotes. If you look in the Rosh says, no, there's a different reason why maybe you don't have to cover the cover the kid's erva even by a milah, even though you hold that it still is considered nakedness, is because that's the mitzvah. Right? Since the whole mitzvah is to cut the kid's erva, therefore we're going to make an exception and we're going to let you make a bracha even with the erva exposed. But in general, a kid's erva is considered an erva, and in general, you're not allowed to say Devarim Shebekdusha. Right? So we have a little machlokas here. We have a machlokas about, a major machlokas, is a kid's erva considered an erva in general to say Devarim Shebekdusha? Okay, so if you look at the Mechaber says, in general, you're not allowed to say Devarim Shebekdusha by ervas kavan. We hold we hold it's an erva. Doesn't matter how old the kid's 1 day old, that's considered nakedness, and you're not allowed to say devarim shebekdusha. Right, and if you look in Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Mila, he says, however, you could have the erva exposed by a mila. Obviously holding like the rush, that's the one exception to the rule. However, if you look in the Rama says, Yish matirin neged ervas kan. The Rama says, in general, we allow you to say devarim shebekdusha by nakedness of a katan. Kol zman she'ein roya lebia, as long as he hasn't reached a certain age that he's halachically considered able to have bia. V'chein ikr. And that is how we hold, right? So the Rama says, no, not like the Mechaber, not like the Rosh, that a kid's erva is considered an erva literally right away, but rather he holds like the other opinion that Rabbeinu Yonah quoted, that a kid's erva is actually never considered an erva. So who do we hold like? So if you look at the Mishnah Berurah says l'chadchila, obviously you should hold like the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch says you should be concerned for a kid's erva even when he is young. But if you can't, you can't, right? Then we'll make an exception, because that's what the Rama holds, is the Iker Shita. So let's assume we do hold like the Rama. What is that age? What's the age that you have to start being concerned for a kid's erva? So if you look in the Magen Avram, he says 9 years old, right? And that's what's the reason for 9 years old? Because if you look in the Gemara assumes that's the age that if a kid would have bia, that would have a halachic status of bia, and that would be that's when he has a din erva. That's what the Magen Avram says, right? If you look in the Gra goes so far, and he says no, maybe even until the kid's 12, it would actually have a status of not being an erva. And he quotes various Gemaras where we say that a kid isn't like grown until he's like physically until he's like 12. Okay. However, if you look in the Achronim, they seem to side with the Magen Avram that the age limit is 9. If they're not holding like the more Chomer Shita of the Mechaber, who holds even from 1 day. Another discussion they have here is, what about a baby girl? Right? We haven't discussed what's considered an erva for a girl, but we'll see that we're more machmir by a girl. What is that age? Right? So obviously, according to the Shulchan Aruch, it's even when a girl's 1 day old, that would be considered an erva. But what about this other shita of the Rama? What would he say? So if you look at Rav Shlomo Zalman says it's like what the Rama says. When a kid is halachically considered to be able to have bia, and if you look at the Gemara, that's a 3-year-old girl, right? So according to Rav Shlomo Zalman, he says that one should be machmir and not say devarim shebekdusha if there's the nakedness of a 3-year-old girl. But if you look in the Chazon Ish says no, it actually depends on the girl, right? Because a 3-year-old girl is still a baby, right? We're not going to say like he says it's not mistaber that would be considered an erva. He says it would actually depend on the type of girl, but it could be we'll talk about this more in the next year. Okay. The next thing the Kitzur talks about, he talks about this idea that it doesn't help to close your eyes. You actually have to turn your whole body. Right? So if you look in the Gemara says there's a difference between tzoa and between an erva. When it comes to tzoa, let's say you have a piece of tzoa, you put it in a glass box, it's clear from the Gemara that's okay. The Gemara says you put tzoa in a glass box. Oh, you could see it, so that doesn't matter. All we care about that tzoa, that should be covered. But then the Gemara says, let's say there's an erva and you put a glass box over the erva, that doesn't help. Because the pasuk says, Lo yirav v'cha ervas davar. You shouldn't see the erva. In a glass box, you could still see the erva. So, if you look in the Shulchan Aruch says it actually does help to close your eyes, because he says what the Gemara says. The Gemara says we only care about seeing, right? So if you personally close your eyes, or if you're blind or it's night, the Shulchan Aruch says that would actually be okay, because the Gemara says as long as you don't see it, and you don't see it, and he even proves, if you look at the Beis Yosef, he proves this from the Rambam. The Rambam says all you have to do is if you see erva, is that you have to turn your face. Right, when it comes to tzoa, you actually have to turn. Your back has to be facing to it. But the Rambam says by erva, all you have to do is turn your face. So obviously, the Rambam would hold as long as you personally don't see it. So the Beis Yosef says the Rambam would agree that if you're closing your eyes, it would still be okay. However, if you look in the Bach says that's not a proof from the Rambam. The Rambam says you have to turn your face. So the Bach says it's clear from the Rambam that closing your eyes doesn't help. He would have said that. So the Bach has a different sheet. He says no. That what does the Gemara mean when it says that it's a problem to see the erva? It means that you can't be in a position where you're able to see it. You can't be in a position you're able to see it. So what could you do? You can't just close your eyes because you're technically able to see. You can just open your eyes. Or if it's night and it's dark, it's going to be light at some point, and you're going to be able to see it. So he says the Rambam's dafka. The Rambam's very specific when he says you actually have to turn your face, so you're not able to see it in any situation. And then there's one more machmir shita, and this is the shita of the Gra, and the Taz, and the Magen Avraham. It seems like they all have the shita. Mishbur also has like the shita, who says no, it doesn't help to close your eyes. It doesn't help to turn your face. You actually have to turn your whole body. Why? Why does he say that? Because the Gra says we see by tzoa, if you're in the presence of tzoa, you have to turn your whole body. You're going to ask me, but tzoa has nothing to do with seeing? No, but we do have an idea about seeing by tzoa, as we spoken about in the past. That there's an idea that by tzoa, if you're malo einav of the tzoa, if your vision could go far that you could see the tzoa, that's problematic. And the only way to help you in that situation is by turning your whole body. So we see that in some ways there is an idea of tzoa. There is an idea by tzoa that we care about seeing, and we make you turn your whole body. So the Gra, Taz, and Magen Avraham, Mishbur holds like this. They say also by erva, it doesn't help to close your eyes, it doesn't help to turn your head. You rather have to turn your whole body. So who do we hold like? So we do try to hold like this Mishbur, that if you're in the presence of erva, you should turn your whole body. But as we'll see in tomorrow's shir, that there might be different levels of erva. Right? This year we were talking about mamish erva, like a man's private area. That's mamish erva, and we're very machmir about that. But we'll see tomorrow. Maybe there are some more mekel versions of erva, and maybe you could even l'chachila close your eyes. Okay, shkayach.